Everybody, it's Ginger again. Let's do Joshua chapter 12. Last time in chapter 11 we read a lot about the defeated lands that, Joshua defeated one land after another once they entered the promised land. Of course, they got Jericho first, then eventually they got Ai, and then they went to all these other lands, which chapter 11 mentions. Now we're going to go through in chapter 12 the defeated kings of these lands. And this might be one of the times that you're tempted to kind of drop off, but please stick with me. So it's really easy to, if you're not understanding every single little thing, just to kind of push it aside. You'll never understand if you don't stick with it. And you'll never become more biblically literate if you don't stick with it. I have to tell my students stuff like this with what they're studying. So my high school students. So it's important to stick with it and just, glean what you can from every single Bible reading. And over time, it comes together more and more and more. So let's go ahead and stick with 12. I might read as much through it as I can. It could be a little dry, but just stick with it because, a lot of, the more you study the Bible, the more interesting it becomes. And the more you understand it. So, I'm doing it for you. I'm going to read it to you. I'm feeding you this stuff out of my hands. So stick with me. Okay, chapter 12 of Joshua. Remember, we don't really know who wrote this. I mean, Joshua might have written it, but he didn't write the whole thing because at the end it talks about his death, I guess. So, or he might not have. It might have been, I think some people think it's, who did they say they thought it was? I was reading about that. Let's just drop that for now. And let's just read chapter 12. We'll talk about it at a later time. Okay, this is subtitled Kings Defeated by Israel. I'm going to butcher 90% of the names. Don't worry about that. Just stick with me. Now these are the kings of the land whom the sons of Israel defeated, and whose land they possessed beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise, from the valley of the Arnon as far as Mount Hermon and all the Arabah to the east. Mount Hermon's way up at the north. It's past, it's north of the Sea of Galilee. Shihon, the king of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon and ruled from Aroer, which is on the edge of the valley of the Arnon, both in the middle of the valley and half of Gilead, even as far as the brook Jabbok, the border of the sons of Ammon. Now Shihon is the first king mentioned here, and the name Sihon, S-I-H-O-N, means warrior. So, their names meant a quality of them. So Israel here, Joshua defeated a warrior. And the Arabah as far as the sea of Chinneroth toward the east, and as far as the sea of the Arabah, even the Salt Sea, the Dead Sea down south, eastward toward Beth Jesimoth, and on the south at the foot of the slopes of Pisgah, and the territory of Og, king of Bashan, one of the remnant of Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and of Edrei. Okay, so they mention here that they got the territory of Og, king of Bashan. So Og is a relative of the Akim. So Og was related to the giants. The Akim were the giant people, the very, very large people. And so Og was also very large because he's, a relative of them. And I didn't look it up, but one of the people I was reading about or listening to talk about Joshua 12 mentioned that in Deuteronomy, I think it is, that the Bible mentions Og's bed as being 13 feet long. So he was a tall man, right? Very tall man. So they were able to defeat giants, and ruled over Mount Hermon and Salcah and Bashan as far as the border of the Geshurites and the Maacathites, and half of Gilead as far as the border of Shihon, king of Heshbon. Moses, the servant of the Lord, and the sons of Israel defeated them. And Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave it to the Reubenites and the Gadites and the half-tribe of Manasseh as a possession. So if you could look at a map I would show, I might try to take a picture of one. I don't know, copyright. If I should, maybe if I mention where I get it. But anyway, or you can just Google a map of a map at the time. And it'll show, like on the east side of the Jordan before they crossed, Moses defeated those kings before he died. And Moses, both Gad and Manasseh, part of Manasseh, and Reuben wanted to be on that east side of the river. They didn't really truly want to enter the promised land. Now, I was listening to the Calvary Chapel minister from Calvary Chapel, South Denver, talk about this. And he was talking about how those people, Gad, Reuben, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, they were cattle ranchers. And so they didn't really want to enter in because they had all this nice, I guess grazing land that they could put their cattle on the east side of the river. Now, I always kind of felt like it was wrong for them not to cross the river. The Lord told them to enter that promised land. Now, they promised to go forth and help their brethren win that land, and they did. But the pastor from Calvary South Denver was talking about how it was a problem because they're surrounded by enemies. They're surrounded by enemies, where they stayed. So they might have had, good land for their cattle, but what did they give up for that? I don't really tell. This is from this book here. I don't even know if it's still in print. I've had it a million years, but so here's the east side of the Jordan, and only part of Manasseh is settled there because the other part of Manasseh was there, and then Gad, and then Reuben. But these guys are enemies: Ammon, Moab, and where's the other one? Oh, Edom. And so they were enemies, and he kind of compared it to modern day Christians who really they're just near the border. They're believers, but they're not fully into it. They're not living the life that God would have for them if they just be all in to following Jesus. He kind of compared it to that, and I thought it was a pretty interesting comparison. Okay, let's go to verse 7. Now, these are the kings of the land. Okay, so those kings on that east side, Moses defeated. And remember, Joshua's a Christ-like figure. The name Jesus and Joshua, it's the same name. So, different translations of the same name. So he was a savior-like figure, and he saved them from these enemies. And, some believers, even though they're saved from enemies, they choose to kind of live on the edge near the enemy with the things they say and do. And that's kind of like the people on the east side of the Jordan. I guess we could get a little bit remind ourselves of those tribes. Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, which became the 12 tribes of Israel. Now those were Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin. But at some time, the tribe of Joseph split in two. He had two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and so the tribe split into two. And so here we're not seeing a land that's the tribe of Joseph because his two sons split into two tribes. Now you won't see on that map a land for the Levites. Levites were given cities to live in, and they were given offerings for their priestly service, but they're not like inheritors of land like the other tribes are. So there's still 12 tribes, but the one tribe, Joseph, is split in two, and then the tribe of Levi isn't like mentioned in the giving of the land. So there's 12 lands there, except that the tribe of Manasseh is split on the east and the west. Okay, so those Moses defeated on the east side of the Jordan, those kings. Now let's go to the west side, okay? Remember, the people crossed the Jordan River, the water parted, they defeated Jericho, and then they were kind of, had some trouble with Ai, but then eventually defeated Ai, and then they moved on from there and defeated many other places, many other cities. Now these are the kings of the land whom Joshua and the sons of Israel defeated beyond the Jordan toward the west side of the Jordan River, from Baal Gad in the valley of Lebanon, even as far, Lebanon's pretty high up in the country, even as far as Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir. And Joshua gave it to the tribes of Israel as a possession according to their divisions. So they defeat these lands, and then he starts distributing them among the tribes. In the hill country, in the lowland, in the Arabah, on the slopes, and in the wilderness, and in the Negev, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, and the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Okay, so these are the peoples that were defeated. Now let me just give you a little reminder of who they are, okay? These Hittites, I got this from the same pastor. He was talking about them. He was saying that they were immigrants from what is now modern-day Turkey. And then the Amorites, were they? I don't know if I wrote anything down about them. Okay, let's go to the Canaanites. Okay, the Canaanites were descendants of Ham, Noah's son. Remember, Noah had Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Well, these are descendants of Ham. Okay, and Ham's son was Canaan. And that's why they call them Canaanites. Then the Perizzites. Now the Perizzites, they don't. I guess people speculate where they came from, but they don't really know who their ancestors are. But they know that they're non-Canaanite. They claim to be non-Canaanite people. Okay, the Hivites are different descendants of Ham. I think they're also related to Ham's son Canaan, but they're different descendants of Ham. So the family broke off there, and then the Jebusites. Did I write them down? Oh, they're also descendants of Ham and Canaan. But he talked about, and I got this all from that pastor, South Calvary, Denver. You should listen to him. He's so good. But anyway, the Jebusites, before Jerusalem was taken over by God's people, it was called Jebus, Jabus. And these Jebusites were from there. So that's how they got the name Jebusites, because they were from like Jebus. I don't think I'm saying it right. Okay, let me keep going with verse 9. Oh, look at my puppy. Look at my baby. Look at the camera, baby. He likes to get love on a regular basis. Constant affection here. Okay, let's read verse 9. The king of Jericho, 1. The king of Ai, which is beside Bethel, 1. Remember, they did Jericho first, then Ai. The king of Jerusalem, 1. The king of Hebron, 1. The king of Jarmuth, 1. The king of Lachish, 1. The king of Eglon, 1. The king of Gezer, 1. The king of Debir, 1. The king of Jeder, 1. The king of Hormah, 1. The king of Arad, 1. The king of Libnah, 1. The king of Adullam, 1. The king of Makkedah, 1. The king of Bethel, 1. The king of Tapua, 1. The king of Hefer, 1. The king of Aphek, 1. The king of Lasharon, 1. The king of Madon, 1. The king of Hazor, 1. The king of Shimron, Miron, 1. The king of Achshaph, 1. The king of Tanakh, 1. The king of Megiddo, 1. I visited Megiddo when I was in Israel. I was too tired to really engage in what the tour guide was saying, but the king of Kadesh, 1. The king of Jochanim and Carmel, 1. The king of Dor and the heights of Dor, 1. The king of Goyim and Gilead, 1. The king of Tirzah, 1. In all, 31 kings. So those are the kings that they defeated. Now, they didn't defeat everybody, and the same pastor I was listening to, he said there were just little tiny scraps of people here and there too, that they didn't get. But these are the 31 kings. They take over. Now, they haven't defeated everything. He mentioned how this is a small country, and I talked to you about that before, and I read it somewhere. Where did I read it? There was an article I was going to mention to you, and this may not be where I read it, because I was looking at a bunch of stuff. But there was an article I found interesting. What was on the website, and it was called The Book of Joshua, and the website is hopewellashland.com. HOPEWELLASHLAND.com. And it's called The Book of Joshua is the article. It's like a commentary. Let me let my dog out, sorry. Gotta let him out. Here, out you go, buddy. Come on. Now those, as I was reading that, oh yeah, so check that out. But Israel is about 150 miles long. It's a long country, north to south, and it's 50 miles wide. How tiny. So anyway, he was talking about, I think it was him, or maybe I read it somewhere, but it's smaller than New Jersey, which is a tiny country, or tiny state in our country. So as you, up north, remember there was that lake above the Sea of Galilee, but it dried up. And then there's the Sea of Galilee. The Jordan River flows all the way down into the Dead Sea, which is near the bottom. So you can go to one end of the country to another easily. It's like going from where I live to Colorado Springs. It's just no big deal. So, but there's so much to see. And all these people groups here. So 31 people groups. And every time he mentions, it's kind of like, they were saying it's, in one of the books I was reading, it's kind of like, I think it was an article I read. It's kind of like a summary of the kings that they've defeated at this point. And every time he mentions one of them that they defeated, he says one, O-N-E, not W-O-N, but O-N-E, like counting them off one by one by one by one. And, we're kind of recounting what God has done and rejoicing in their victory. And, I don't know the pastor's name at South Calvary, but he was talking about how, I think it was him, he was talking about, Joshua, who is a type and shadow of Jesus Christ, went in and defeated these kings in the same way that Jesus defeated our sins when he died on the cross. Remember how I told you that every single Old Testament story points to Jesus Christ, and it's so true. So they overcame the land just as Jesus overcame our sin. Now, some believers, they'll live on the edge and they believe, they're true believers and they're saved, but they might live on the edge where they can get themselves in trouble. And people think because we say we're saved by grace, and we are, that we don't have we think we don't have consequences for our sin. Well, of course we have consequences for sin. That's, when Adam and Eve sinned, it killed all of mankind. It killed all of us. So, and sin brings death. I'm going to change this up. There we go. Sin brings death into the world. Even though Adam and Eve already brought death into the world, it seems like sin still kills, in a sense. It still kills something. So I think people just misunderstand. They don't understand grace because they're not, as they become more biblically literate, it becomes more clear. So, and works are a result of faith. So anyway, but I wanted to share that with you. I will post it tonight, and then I won't post another one until after Christmas. So I hope you have a great Christmas, and I will see you very soon. Have a good one.